We have already put up a brief introduction, inductive Hebrew grammar, beginning at Genesis 1:1 through 5. What I would like to do in this second video is to do Genesis 1:6 through 8. What you will need, as we've said in the first video, is a Hebrew Bible, a dictionary. I believe also a good grammar book would be, I really would recommend a good one, Winegreen. I really like Winegreen because it's a very classical grammar. So I would recommend Winegreen. I've used that for many years in my teaching. It can be used in a deductive kind of way because my focus is inductive. And if you read through elements of Winegreen as a handbook, along with my, can I say, inductive discussion of grammar, I think that combination will really help an inductive / deductive approach. Also, I have written a small grammar that's out, a deductive and inductive grammar. It can be found again on Google Books under my name, Dr. Gary Stats. So if you would like to use that, I have a very brief grammar that summarizes in a deductive way, and then we go through each of these words inductively. But my hope is that you have a Hebrew Bible open and that you're able to follow me. If you're just beginning, try to learn the alphabet first, and then, by that I mean the consonants and the vowels, and then begin to follow along. Vocabulary will be explained as we go. I do give lists in my grammar, but I think we'll also see them as we move through the text. So now we're on the second video, the second part. And what you might try to do is take the lessons according to the verses. That is, for example, the first part, you could do verse 1 as lesson 1, verse 2 as lesson 2, and so forth. And so now we'll be doing verses 6 to 8, so it would be lesson 6, 7, and 8. But I'm just going to talk through it, and so you would be arranging that in your own study of this great text. So as we begin then, verse 6, we go to the second day of creation. And I'm going to read from my Hebrew Bible and then make comments grammatically from my Hebrew Bible as we go through. So it reads, Vayomer Elohim yehi rakia b'toch hamayim vihi mabdil bein mayim la mayim. And if you could repeat that also as I read it. Repetition is the mother of learning. And I'll read it slowly so you can repeat it with me. Always read out loud in biblical Hebrew and biblical Greek. Vayomer Elohim yehi rakia b'toch hamayim vihi mabdil bein mayim la mayim. And so as we begin, Vayomer Elohim, and God said. Notice Vayomer is, as we saw in the first part, 1 to 5, is a verb that is used throughout here. And it means, and God said. It's from the root amar, and is what we call a one aleph or a pei aleph verb. And notice, as we had commented in the first part, that you have a holum rather than an I class vowel. If you were using, let's say, Winegreen, for example, he would have yishmor as the cow imperfect third masculine singular, an I, O vowel pattern. Here we have an O setri vowel pattern. And that holum after the yod, and by the way, the yod is showing that we are looking at a third masculine singular form, but the yod appears here followed by the holum because of the aleph. The aleph is quiescent. and it almost becomes vowel-like. And historically, when you look, as we said, at these one aleph forms or these pay aleph verbs, remember pay is first position, ayin is second, and lamed is third. So grammarians sometimes call it one aleph or pay aleph. So, and God said, cow imperfect, third masculine singular, from the root amar. And notice the vav here is turning it over. So, and God said. Elohim, we've already looked at in the first part in verse 1. It looks at God's transcendence. It looks at his power. And we've talked about the plural. Jewish interpreters take it as a plural of majesty. Christian interpreters understand both. It's a plural of majesty, and seen through the progressive revelation of Hebrew scriptures and Greek New Testament, seeing the triune Godhead, the Trinity. So as we read on then, and God said. By the way, one thing that I think is an interesting note, when we look at the Aramaic Targums, which was a translation of the Hebrew in Aramaic after the Israelites came back from the Babylonian captivity, it was often read aloud and with an interpretation when the Torah was read in Hebrew. And it reads something like this, and the Memra said, and the Memra means word in Aramaic. It's interesting, it is used interchangeably with Targum Yerushalmi, with God himself. And I've made a comment on another video that in John chapter 1, the Logos, in the beginning was the Word, the Logos. I believe John is referring back to the Memra, to the Aramaic word for word, which was used interchangeably with God. And so John is saying Jesus is fully divine. He is fully God. So as we move on, God said, Yehi rakia b'toch hamayim. Notice Yehi is from the root haya, again, a third hay or a lamed hay form, and it is, again, a jussive. We could call it a cow imperfect / jussive because it's a command. And so God said, let there be, and the hay, by the way, in these lamed hay forms, drop out in the imperfect jussive form here. So God said, let there be a rakia. Rakia means expanse. And it's like a hammered out disc that God is going to slide between the waters to divide the upper waters from the lower. And so we have a poetic, beautiful poetic imagery here. And rakia, by the way, is used interchangeably for Shemayim, heaven. We see that, for example, in Psalm 19. When I consider your heavens, the work, the expanse, the work of your fingers, and so forth. In other words, the two words are used interchangeably, rakia after this and heavens. But initially, I think we're looking at a disc being slid between the waters. So God said, let there be an expanse, b'toch hamayim, in the midst of the waters. That here is that inseparable preposition in, followed by two nouns in construct. Toch, meaning midst or middle, and then we put of. Remember, two nouns standing back to back, we put of between them, like the book John. It would be the book of John. So here, it's in the midst, waters, so we would render it in the midst of the waters, two nouns in construct. So let there be an expanse, the text is saying, in the midst of the waters, vihi magdil bein mayim la mayim. And let there be a dividing. Notice again, vihi is again another adjussive form from haya, and the vav here is a conjunction, and basically it's a simple conjunction. Historically, it would have been ve yehi, but you cannot have two shavahs together. So the shavah underneath the yod dropped out or elided, and then we had a hirik and a yod, a long hirik yod form in this jussive imperfect / form. So let there be a dividing. Mabdil is a noun meaning dividing or division. It's from badal, to divide. And notice the mem here is making it into a noun. So let there be a dividing. It has like a hifil pointing to it, but that is an A-I vowel pattern if you were looking at an imperfect like yabdil. But I believe here we're looking at a participle, a noun. So let there be a dividing between Bain Hamayim La Mayim. Between, Bain is a preposition, and Mayim means waters. So between the waters, notice the dual form in Ayim, up to the waters, La Mayim. And that lamed is an inseparable preposition with the article underneath. That comment underneath is showing that we have an article here. So Le Hamayim became La Mayim. And so between the waters, up to the waters. Notice the king is speaking here. And he is telling that there should be a division. The king is the Lord. Between the waters. He just speaks and it happens. And I'm reminded as I think about the ancient Near East and in reading the Enuma Elish text, it's interesting that Marduk has to struggle with Tiamat to divide the waters, where here there's no struggle. God is the king on the throne, and all he does is speak and simply says, let there be a division between the waters and up to the waters. It is interesting, as we read in the New Testament, we see a very similar thing with Jesus, who commands the waters to be quiet. When the storm, like in Mark 4, for example, literally it's sort of like stop barking is the Greek idea, if you want to give it like an idiomatic expression. So Jesus commands the waters just like the Lord does here. And this is also interesting because we're thinking of the Exodus as well. This is the creation account. And then when we go to Exodus chapter 14, God divides the waters again in redemption. And I've often said the God of creation is the God of redemption. And I believe we see that here from the very beginning, from the get-go, so to speak. And as we look at John 1, Christ is the Word by whom all things were made, but then he is the Savior of redemption. He becomes flesh and puptense among us and ultimately redeems us by dying upon the cross for our sins and conquering death on the third day, that through faith in him we can have eternal life. So the God of creation here is the God of the Exodus, the God of redemption. Same way, I believe, when we read the New Testament. But then we go on in verse 7, Vaya'as Elohim et harakia vayabdel bein hamayim asher mitachat larakia uvein hamayim asher me'al larakia vayehi chen. So we need to divide this up into shorter phrases, and I'll say them slowly, and if you could repeat with me. Vaya'as Elohim et ha-rakia. And we would translate that, and God made the expanse. By the way, notice Vaya'as is from the root asa. It's a third hay, or a lamed hay form, and like haya, the hay elides or drops out in the imperfect here. So it's a cow imperfect, third masculine singular from asa. So, and God made. And notice the vav here is a vav consecutive or a vav conversive, putting that imperfect, which by itself would be futuristic, but with the vav, it puts it into the past. And this is what we call a vav conversive. It's taking the future, if ya'as would be he will do, but va ya'as means he did. So God made, and asa simply means to make. God made et harakia. Et is again the sign of the direct object, and harakia means expanse. Notice the hey here is the article, and rakia means expanse. So God made the expanse, and now we come to the verb. Vayavdel, and if we could repeat it together, Vayavdel bein hamayim asher metachat larakia uvein hamayim asher me'al larakia. Vayichen. So the verb Vayavdel, and he caused a division. Notice the root is badal, and when we look at the vowel patterns, the thematic vowels would be the vowel under the yod and the final vowel. So the vowel under the yod is a patha, the final vowel is a tseri. And so an A, I/E vowel pattern gives it away as a hifil imperfect, third masculine singular with the yod showing we're looking at the third person. And the vav is another vav hafek or vav conversive, turning it over. So literally, he caused a division. Again, as I said in my first section, that if you go to the YouTube under my name, Dr. Gary Stats, there will be a section in which we give vowel patterns to understand how to parse imperfects in all of your 7 stems. And so when you have an A-E vowel pattern, you're looking at a causative, at a hifil. The hifil, remember, is the causative stem in Hebrew. So God caused a division between the waters, bein hamayim. Notice bein is the preposition meaning between, and hamayim has the definite article ha again with mayim, meaning waters, a dual form showing again plurality. And notice ha is your definite article, and as we had said before, the dogish forte in the mem is there because historically the article was hal and it had a final lamed. The lamed, by progressive assimilation in the historical development, had gone into the mem, causing a doubling, hence a dogish forte. So he caused a division between the waters, which were literally asher metachat larakia, which were from under up to the expanse. Asher is your relative pronoun. Metachat, here you have your preposition mit and tachat, from under. And notice the mem here has a hirig and a dogish forte in the tav. That's because the noon of the mem has assimilated historically again. So min tachat became mit tachat with the doubling of the tav by progressive assimilation. So between the waters, which were literally from under up to the expanse, the above waters. And notice again, rakia means expanse, and the lamed here with the comments is showing a definite article. So he divided the waters which were from under up to the expanse, uvein hamayim asher me'al, and notice, and between the waters which were from above. And notice u again is and. We have the shurik again instead of ve, because 2 labials together, ve, vein, we have dissimilation historically to assure it. So it is a conjunction though. And between, following then this preposition, hamayim, between the waters. Again, ha, the definite article, and mayim means water. So he divided between the waters which were under, from between the waters, asher me'al la rakia, which were literally above, up to the expanse. So here we have the min again, but notice we have it sere, because again, the ayin being a guttural cannot take a doubling. Ayin is guttural, pronounced in the back of the throat, along with aleph and hey and so forth. And so what has happened here, since the min could not assimilate in the ayin, it dropped out, and you have compensatory lengthening from a hirig to a tseri. So which were from above, literally then, up to the expanse. The lamed here is your inseparable preposition, and the comments is showing a definite article, which were from below, which up to the expanse. So the waters are being divided by the expanse, the upper and the lower. And then vayehi chen, and it was so. It is interesting that vayehi, again, is from the root haya, and we saw that in the first section of 1 to 5. Again, it's a third hay or a lamed hay verb. The hay is dropped out, and the yod shows we're looking at a third person singular, and we're looking again at a kal imperfect third masculine singular from haya, and the vav here is turning it over. It's a vav hafek or a vav conversive, vav consecutive, whatever one wants to call it. And it was chen. It was thus. Chen is your adverb. It was so. So God, again, like we said, doesn't have to struggle. He is the king on the throne. He just speaks, and the waters are divided. But then we move to the next verse, verse 8. Vayikra, and I'll read it slowly again, if you could read after me. Vayikra Elohim larakia shamayim. Vayehi erev, vayehi boker yom sheni. So as we read this, if we wanted to read it in a normal speed, Vayikra Elohim larakia shamayim. Vayehi erev, vayehi boker yom sheni. Now notice, Vayikra is from the root, again, kara, to call. And we have that lamed hey, or lamed aleph form, final aleph, third aleph. And God called, and we have a kal imperfect again, third masculine singular, from the root kara, with a vav hafek or a vav conversive or a vav consecutive, however you want to call it. And God called literally to the expanse. Notice larakia. The lamed is your inseparable preposition to. You have your definite article again in your comments. So le harakia became larakia. He called to the expanse shamayim. In other words, shamayim meaning heaven. It's almost like God is saying, as a king, expanse, your name now is going to be heaven. And by the way, we are now going to see the interchange between rakia and shamayim, the two referring to the same thing, that is heaven. And so following that, we have vayehi erev, vayehi boker yom sheni. That is, and there was evening. Notice vayehi again is from haya, and it's a lamed hey, as we've said, third kal imperfect, third masculine singular with the yod prefix, with the vav hafek or the vav conversive. And there was evening, erev, again, as we saw in verse 5, there was evening, and there was the same form, Kal imperfect, third masculine singular from Haya, Voker, again, same word, morning, as we saw in verse 5. There was evening, and this will be repetition throughout. There was evening, there was morning, and so forth. Day 2 or day 3. So there was evening, and there was morning. Yom Sheni, day 2. And by the way, the text uses ordinal numbers, 1, 2, throughout here in this great text. So day 2, Yom, again meaning day, and Sheni, meaning 2. So as we look at this great text, I believe we are seeing the power of God, who basically slides the disc, as it were, between the waters. He names what the heaven is going to be, and the earth, and really it shows that he is the sovereign king. He does not have to struggle with the waters as Marduk had to do. And so we're seeing the greatness of God. And again, as I said before, I think we have the same great teaching in the New Testament, where Jesus, as the God-man, does not have to struggle. He can walk on the waters, and he speaks, and the waters are stilled. So what a beautiful, beautiful text that leads us into a greater understanding of who the Lord is and his greatness in the Hebrew Bible as the God separating the waters, and then later at Exodus in the New Testament as Jesus, the God-man. For me as a Christian believer in Jesus Christ, a minister, as the God-man, simply speaks and tells the waters to be quiet, to sort of stop barking, as it were.